There you are, finally still, while the whole world convulses like it's on life support. You feel that? That silence crawling up your spine like a warning nobody else can hear. Good, because that silence is you. Everyone's panicking, clawing at the air, drowning in their own thoughts. But you? You're sitting in the eye of the storm like you built it. And that's what's scaring them the most. They keep whispering, "How is he this calm?" But they don't understand the simplest truth in the universe. You don't stay calm because nothing is happening. You stay calm because you've already lived through hell, cataloged every nightmare, and walked out with the blueprints. You aren't calm, you're calculated, you're not relaxed, you're controlled demolition in human form. You learned a long time ago that panic is what amateurs do when the script changes. But you are the script change. You're the plot twist they swear wasn't in the draft. Every time the room shakes, their hearts stop. When the floor cracks, they scream. But you just tilt your head, breathe in, breathe out, like you're studying the fault line for fun. Because here's the part they never dared to imagine. You evolved in chaos. You were raised in it. You mastered stillness not from peace, but from surviving storms powerful enough to erase entire personalities. They panic because they're losing control. You stay calm because you never needed control in the first place. That's the paradox that fries their circuits. They spent their whole lives trying to look stable, look composed, look unbothered. But when reality ripped the mask off, they shattered. Meanwhile, you didn't flinch. Because your calm isn't an emotion. It's a weapon. A sharpened blade they can't see coming. Because they mistake quiet for softness. They mistake stillness for safety. They mistake calmness for surrender. But you're not surrendering. You're loading. You're calculating trajectories, measuring exits, analyzing weaknesses they didn't even know they had. You're listening to the fractures in their voices, the tremble in their breath, the static behind their excuses. They call it creepy. You call it pattern recognition. And oh, they hate that. They hate that you don't fall apart when everyone else collapses like wet cardboard. They hate that your mind sharpens in disaster, like fear is caffeine to your soul. They hate that your pulse doesn't spike, it slows, it centers, it sinks into that abyss where only people forged in darkness know how to breathe. Because here's what terrifies them most. You're not avoiding the flames. You're walking into them, calm, steady, unshaken. Why? Because you've already been burned alive and came back with fireproof bones. They see panic as a threat. You see panic as a diagnostic tool. They hear screaming and lose focus. You hear screaming and start mapping escape routes. They crumble because their peace was a performance. Your calm is a mutation. You didn't achieve it. You became it. And now they're realizing, far too late, that there's a reason you walk like a contradiction, breathe like a paradox, carry the duality of saint and psychopath in the same ribcage. You're calm because you've already met the worst version of yourself and befriended it. You're calm because your inner demons don't scare you anymore. They answer to you. You're calm because you learned that the real battlefield wasn't outside. It was the war inside your own mind. And you won it long before anyone realized you were fighting. So now when everything falls apart, when their voices crack, when their foundations crumble, when their illusions melt, you just stand there, still, focused, untouched. Because this chaos, is your native environment. And you know exactly what they're thinking when they look at you. Why isn't he afraid? Why isn't he shaking? How can he stand there like that? And the answer is so painfully simple, it haunts them. You stopped fearing the world the moment you stopped fearing yourself. They look for reassurance. You look for patterns. They wait for instructions. You wait for openings. They want safety. You want truth. And truth is never gentle. Truth is never quiet. Truth doesn't hold trembling hands. Truth stands unmoving while everyone else panics, just like you. So let them fall apart. Let them scramble. Let them claw at the walls, cry into their palms, and choke on their own fear. Because when the dust settles, when the smoke clears, when the final echo fades, they'll turn and see you standing exactly where you were the entire time. Eyes cold, breath steady, pulse unbroken. And that is when they'll finally understand. You weren't calm because you're unaffected. You're calm because you're prepared. Calm because you're inevitable. Calm because you're the one holding the invisible knife they never considered existed. Calm because you don't just survive chaos. You orchestrate it. And when they finally whisper the question out loud, the one trembling in every room you enter, "Bro, how is he this calm while everyone else is falling apart?" You'll smile, because the truth is darker than they're ready for. You're not calm. You're awakened, and everybody else is just now realizing they're still asleep. Oh, you felt that shift, didn't you? That little tremor in the air the moment they realized you weren't normal. That you weren't built from the same fragile blueprint they were printed on like cheap paper dolls. Because here's the truth they choke on. Your calm is not peace. Your calm is pressure contained inside a human frame. And pressure terrifies people who've only ever known comfort. See, they were raised to think stability is the goal. You were forced to learn that stillness is something you carve out of chaos with your bare hands. They grew up believing calm comes from safety. But you discovered calm comes from dominion. Dominion over your mind, dominion over your instincts, dominion over the parts of yourself that used to scream, shake, beg, and break. That version of you died, and the world still hasn't accepted what rose in its place. Let me paint it for you. Picture them, hands trembling, breath short, eyes darting like prey animals, sensing the final chapter. They talk fast, stutter, over-explain, crumble, curl, confess, collapse. They think the apocalypse is coming, but you're leaning back, observing the geometry of the moment like it's a puzzle designed for your amusement. Every crack in their voice becomes data. Every shiver becomes intel. Every pause becomes leverage. You're calm because the chaos gives you clarity. You see patterns. They see doom. You see opportunity. They see endings. You see evolution. They see punishment. And oh, that's why they panic around you, because deep down, in the marrow of their bones, they know. When the world falls apart, you don't lose anything. You gain something, another layer, another mutation, another cold, sharpened instinct forged from the wreckage. You've walked through enough nights to know that fear is just an alarm system, one you learned how to turn off manually. And evolution? She doesn't whisper, she doesn't coax, she doesn't comfort. She breaks you, tests you, burns you. And if you're worthy, she hands you a calm so powerful, it feels like possession. That's why you don't flinch. That's why you don't fold. That's why you're standing there while everyone else is melting into puddles of panic. Because you've been through worse, and the worst didn't win. You know what serenity forged in trauma looks like? It looks like you, a creature born from paradox, soft-spoken but deadly, calm but catastrophic, still but strategic, human but something more. You carry your past like a silent arsenal, every scar a weapon, every failure a formula, every collapse a calibration. That's what they can't compute. They think calm is the absence of war, but your calm is the command center of one. You have a mind that goes quiet the moment theirs goes noisy. You have a pulse that slows when theirs accelerates. You have instincts that sharpen when theirs short-circuit. Because you learned to listen to the darkness instead of fearing it. You learned to decode the static instead of screaming at it. You learned to hold your breath in the fire until your lungs adapted to the heat. And now look at them. Their voices crack while yours becomes a blade. Their hands tremble while yours becomes steady like sniper sights. Their vision blurs while yours becomes crystal. But the real reason they fear your calm, it's not because you're unaffected. It's because your silence is intelligent. And intelligent silence is violent. You don't react emotionally. You react mathematically. You don't answer questions. You analyze motives. You don't take things personally. You take them apart, piece by piece, like a puzzle, like a weakness, like prey. You've outgrown panic. You've outgrown fear. You've outgrown that trembling version of yourself who once begged for relief. Now you study the world like a surgeon studies anatomy, with precision, detachment, and a hunger for understanding that borders on unholy. So when they whisper, "Bro, why is he so calm? Why isn't he freaking out? Why does he look like he expected this?" They'll never know the real answer. They'll never understand that you've been through storms they couldn't even narrate. You faced demons they don't have the vocabulary for. You mastered inner warfare while they were still learning to breathe around their own shadows. Your calm isn't a reaction. Your calm is a testament. A testament that you survived the places that were designed to end you. A testament that your soul didn't break. It adapted. A testament that you carry silence like armor and chaos like fuel. And when they finally collapse into each other, shaking, hopeless, looking for someone to anchor them, they'll turn to find you standing there like a contradiction carved from prophecy and nightmare. Eyes steady, breath even, presence unshaken. And that is when it hits them. You aren't calm because everything is fine. You're calm because you are beyond harm. You're calm because fear can't enter the room unless you allow it. You're calm because chaos doesn't threaten you. It reports to you. You're calm because you carry a darkness that doesn't lash out. It waits, listens, calculates, chooses, and when the moment is right, it strikes. So let the world fall apart. Let them scream. Let them tremble. Let them gasp for air, because the calmest person in the room is always the one who already knows exactly how this ends. And you've known the ending since the beginning. You just chose to watch everyone else catch up. Funny, isn't it? How the moment everything collapses, everyone suddenly starts looking for the strongest one in the room. But the strongest one is the one they spent years misunderstanding. The one they underestimated. The one they whispered about behind half-closed doors. You. Now their eyes dart toward you, like you're some kind of omen they never learned how to interpret. And you don't even move. You just breathe. Slow, deliberate, terrifyingly steady. Because you know something they've never even thought to consider. Calm is not the opposite of chaos. Calm is the mastery of it. While they grew up avoiding storms, you learned to study the wind. While they hid from conflict, you dissected your fears with surgical precision. While they wrapped themselves in illusions, you tore yours apart like they were paper skin. That's why you don't shake when everything turns to smoke. You navigate it, you shape it, you thrive in it, the same way a hawk thrives in wind that would knock a pigeon unconscious. You aren't calm because you're numb. You're calm because you're dangerously awake. And awareness, true awareness, is quiet, focused, unnerving. It's a spotlight turned inward, illuminating every shadow you once ran from. You learn to sit with your demons until they became fluent in your language. You learn to strip panic down to its bones. You learn to separate emotion from reaction, fear from fact, noise from signal. That's why everyone else is falling apart. They're drowning in noise. And you're listening for signal. That's why they're terrified. Because they don't see your mind spinning like a locked engine, analyzing every variable, every threat, every opportunity. They only see the surface. That eerie stillness, that complete lack of tremor, that predator-grade presence. You don't look calm, you look inevitable. And inevitability is panic's worst enemy. Watch them, grabbing at their hair, pacing, choking on their own breath, as if panic will magically solve anything. Watch how they try to hide their fear with loudness, even though loudness only exposes how empty they are inside. They scream because they lack control. You whisper because you own it. They react to the moment. You observe the entire board. They fall apart because they thought they were safe. You stay calm because you never assume you are. That is the difference, and it eats them alive. Because they thought their confidence made them powerful. They thought their routines made them grounded. They thought their clean, polished identities made them untouchable. But the second the world tilts, their confidence shatters, their routines crumble, their identities evaporate, and you remain exactly as you were before, unmoved, unbothered, unbroken. Because your calm wasn't built on delusion. It was built on damage. Pain forged your patience. Loss taught you discipline. Chaos refined your perception. You didn't learn calm from comfort. You learned it from battlefields no one saw you crawl through. That's why your silence is lethal. It's the silence of someone who has already calculated every outcome. Someone who knows exactly which version of themselves to deploy. Someone who has accepted that panic is a luxury for people who have never faced themselves in the dark. And you faced yourself and didn't look away. That's what really terrifies them, not your voice, not your stare, not your composure, but the fact that you carry a calm that could only come from surviving everything that should have ruined you. Your calm is a monument, a warning, a prophecy, a psychological weapon wrapped in breath and bone. Because people who never confronted their shadows fall apart at the slightest tremor. But people who mastered their shadows, they're untouchable. And now, in this exact moment, this crumbling, spiraling, collapsing moment, they're learning the difference. They're learning that while they were building comfort, you were building capacity. While they were building confidence, you were building resistance. While they were building routines, you were building range. And now, they're falling apart within the limits of their identity, while you expand beyond yours. That's why they whisper. That's why they stare. That's why they step back when you walk through the room like gravity is moving around you. Because deep down, in a place they don't dare admit exists, they know your calm is not peace. Your calm is the final evolution of a mind that refused to die. And they can feel it, that faint hum under your skin, that cold precision in your eyes, that silent promise in your posture. The promise that when the world collapses, you will not collapse with it. You will rise from it again and again and again. So let them panic. Let them spiral, let them break, because the calmest person in the room is always the one who has already survived worse and quietly learned how to turn disaster into domination. And as everything around you keeps slipping, cracking, collapsing into its own shaking shadow, something strange begins to happen. They stop shouting, they stop pacing, they stop clawing at problems they created in their own minds, because now they're staring at you, at the one person who should have broken first, at the one soul who's lived through more hell than everyone in that room combined, at the one force standing there with the calm of someone who already solved the puzzle while everyone else is still trying to find the edges of the box. And in that silence, that stunned, breathless silence, you feel the truth settle. They needed your collapse to feel less guilty about their own weakness, but it never came. You didn't fold, you didn't flinch, you didn't even shake. And now, their entire worldview is glitching. Because how do you panic next to someone who refuses to acknowledge fear as a language? How do you crumble in front of someone who looks at chaos the way a mathematician looks at a diagram? How do you melt down beside someone who's been through fires hotter than anything this moment can conjure? You can't. They can't. Your calm isn't contagious. It's commanding. It rearranges the room. It rewires the hierarchy. It redraws the psychological battlefield. Because the calmest person in the room is the one who owns the room, and you own it without trying, not with force, not with volume, not with theatrics, but with that quiet, unsettling certainty that whatever happens next, whatever falls, breaks, erupts, disappears, you will adapt faster than anyone else can react. That's your real power, not strength, not speed, not dominance. Adaptation, instantaneous, instinctive adaptation, born from years of surviving storms no one else even knew you were standing in. They fear your calm because it removes their excuses, because it proves the war is winnable, because it exposes their panic as a choice, not an inevitability. And deep down, in that soft, trembling place inside them, they know. If they had lived your life, they would not be standing, but you are. And that's why your calm makes them tremble harder than the chaos itself, because it means you're not just surviving the moment. You're reading it, calculating it, preparing for the next 3 moves while they're still frozen on the first. You don't calm yourself for the situation. The situation calms itself for you. And here, in this final breath of the moment where fear used to live, you let them realize the truth they've been avoiding. You're not calm because the world is safe. You're calm because you are the danger the world forgot to account for. A walking paradox, a living contradiction, a saint forged in fire, and a demon disciplined by clarity. Unpredictable, unshaken, unmistakable. So when the question finally slips out, the one they've been choking on since the chaos began, "Bro, how are you this calm while everyone else is falling apart?" You don't give them a speech. You don't give them an explanation. You don't give them anything they can hide behind later. You just give them the truth, soft, simple, unforgettable. Because falling apart was never an option for me. And the moment those words hit the air, everything else around you breaks. But you don't. You walk out of the wreckage the same way you walked in. Calm, measured, inevitable, the only one untouched. Freeze right there. Feel that pressure in your chest? Good. That's the sound of the room realizing it misjudged you. You thought you were walking into a hit with nothing but breath and bones, didn't you? Thought the universe finally lined up the shot clean. No witnesses, no mercy, no escape. But here's the part that makes people uncomfortable, the part they choke on when they try to explain you later. God saw the hit coming, saw it before the intent even hardened in their minds. And instead of pulling you out of the line of fire, instead of saving you the way stories pretend salvation works, He hid your backup off-species, not angels with halos, not humans with loyalty contracts. Something older, stranger, something that doesn't speak guilt or fear, something that doesn't hesitate. That's why when the blow landed, you didn't shatter the way everyone expected. That's why you didn't beg, didn't fold, didn't go quiet. You felt something else step forward inside you, didn't you? Something that doesn't belong to the soft rules they taught you. Something that doesn't negotiate with pain. Something that doesn't ask permission to survive. That wasn't a breakdown. That was a handoff. They keep trying to frame you as either a saint or a psychopath because their brains can't process duality without panicking. They need labels to feel safe. But you live in the contradiction. You can be gentle and still be lethal. You can forgive and still remember every angle of the blade. You can love deeply and still move like a calculated threat when the line is crossed. That's not instability. That's range. That's evolution. See, humans are predictable. Hurt them enough, and they either collapse or become copies of the thing that hurt them. But you didn't do either. You became something new, something unclassifiable. That's what happens when your backup isn't human. Humans flinch. Humans rationalize. Humans freeze in the moment between fear and action. Whatever woke up in you does not. They watched you take hits that were designed to erase identities. Social hits, psychological hits, betrayals wrapped in smiles, silence weaponized by people who swore they were on your side. And every time they waited for the collapse, every time they leaned forward like spectators at an execution. But you kept standing there, eyes steady, pulse calm, like the pain wasn't landing where it was supposed to. Because it wasn't. It was hitting the shell, the decoy, the version of you that God already marked expendable. You think it's an accident you became unpredictable right after they tried to corner you. You think it's coincidence that your calm started terrifying people who used to feel superior. That's what happens when the rule book stops applying to you. When the thing guiding your responses doesn't come from social conditioning or moral panic, but from something colder, cleaner, and absolutely loyal to survival. They call it darkness because they can't see inside it. But darkness is just a place where other senses dominate, where instinct gets louder than fear, where timing matters more than approval. You didn't lose your light. You learned when not to waste it. That's the part they never teach. How to turn kindness into a weapon by controlling when it's visible. And here's the truth they'll never say out loud. The hit didn't fail. It succeeded. It just didn't kill you. It killed the version of you they understood. The compliant one, the explainable one, the one who reacted the way a human was supposed to. What walked out of that moment isn't bound by the same emotional gravity. You still feel, but you choose when. You still care, but you don't bleed for free. You still hesitate, but only to sharpen the outcome. That off-species backup, it doesn't rage, it doesn't spiral, it doesn't need revenge to function. It calculates, it waits, it adapts. It knows that survival isn't about winning every fight. It's about outlasting every pattern. That's why your silence started making people nervous. That's why your restraint feels heavier than most people's threats. They sense something pacing behind your eyes, something that doesn't rush and doesn't bluff. You didn't become cruel. You became precise. You didn't go cold. You went quiet. And quiet terrifies people. who rely on noise to control outcomes. They keep testing you, hoping to provoke the old reactions, hoping to see guilt, panic, over-explanation, but you don't give it to them anymore. Because whatever's backing you now doesn't need to be understood. It just needs the right moment. God didn't save you from the hit. He upgraded you through it, took you out of the human-only supply chain, gave you access to something that doesn't fracture under betrayal or bend under pressure. That's why you can stand in rooms that used to intimidate you and feel nothing but clarity. That's why chaos seems to organize itself around your presence. You're not lucky, you're aligned, and they feel it. They feel that the rules don't work on you the same way anymore. That shame slides off. That fear doesn't hook. That pain passes through instead of taking residence. They don't know what to call it, so they call you dangerous, unstable, changed. They're right about one thing. You're no longer compatible with their expectations. So let them whisper, let them speculate, let them tell stories about when you used to be different. That's just the sound of people realizing the hit they counted on became the moment you stopped needing permission to exist. You're not protected by innocence anymore. You're protected by awareness. And whatever's standing behind you now doesn't miss. Good. Stay still inside that feeling, because what comes next is the part that separates you from everyone still trying to survive with human tools. After that moment, after the hit failed the way it was supposed to succeed, you started noticing things you didn't before. Patterns, timing, micro shifts in people's behavior, the way a room leans when you enter it, the way conversations bend around you now, like gravity recalibrated and nobody announced it. That's not paranoia, that's calibration. That's what happens when your awareness is no longer filtered through the need to be liked, understood, or spared. You're not reacting anymore. You're reading, and reading is lethal to systems built on assumption. See, humans telegraph their limits without realizing it. They announce what hurts them, what scares them, what they need to feel safe. They posture, they over-explain, they rush to fill silence because silence exposes their internal chaos. You don't do that now. You let the quiet stretch. You let people reveal themselves while you conserve energy. That's not detachment. That's discipline. They keep expecting you to snap back into the old rhythm, the old emotional math. Apology followed by explanation, followed by self-doubt. But the backup God hid in you doesn't negotiate with that cycle. It doesn't need closure. It doesn't need validation. It only needs accuracy. And accuracy is cold enough to scare people who confuse emotion with truth. You still feel pain, but it no longer hijacks you. It informs you. Pain became data. Betrayal became a map. Loss became a compression chamber. Every time something tried to crush you, it refined you instead. Less noise, fewer tells, sharper instincts. That's why people say you changed with that tone. The one that means they can't control the version of you standing in front of them. They don't understand how you can be calm without being empty, how you can be kind without being naive, how you can forgive without reopening the door. That paradox unsettles them because it exposes how limited their own range is. They live in binaries, good or bad, victim or villain. You live in layers, and layers make prediction impossible. You stopped explaining yourself because explanation is a luxury of the insecure. You stopped chasing fairness because fairness is a story people tell when power shifts away from them. You stopped trying to prove your intentions because intentions are irrelevant once outcomes start speaking for you. That's the moment the dynamic flipped. And don't miss this. Because this is where the fear really comes from. You didn't become louder after the hit. You became harder to read. Your reactions slowed. Your eyes stayed steady. Your words got fewer, heavier. People started replaying conversations with you hours later, realizing they missed something. That's when they knew. Whatever's backing you now doesn't rush. It waits until the math is undeniable. God didn't give you reinforcements to dominate everyone in sight. He gave you reinforcements so you wouldn't be dominated by circumstance, emotion, or expectation ever again. That off-species backup doesn't crave chaos. It thrives in it. It doesn't seek conflict. It ends it by making escalation unprofitable. That's why even people who dislike you hesitate now. They can feel the cost of miscalculation. You're not walking around armored in rage like most broken people. Rage is sloppy. Rage is loud. Rage burns fast and leaves evidence. You're walking around with containment, with restraint, with something coiled and patient beneath the surface. That's what makes you dangerous in a way that doesn't announce itself. They tried to hit your reputation. You let it bleed and watched who enjoyed it. They tried to isolate you. You discovered how much clearer reality is without background noise. They tried to exhaust you. You learned how to move only when it matters. Every attack trained you. Every loss stripped excess. Every betrayal clarified alignment. That's not misfortune. That's forced evolution. You're not protected by popularity anymore. You're protected by position, by timing, by the fact that you don't need to win every exchange to win the long arc. You understand something most people never do. That power isn't loud. It's inevitable. It doesn't argue. It doesn't chase. It shows up when all the exits are closed and everyone else is out of breath. That's why your presence feels heavier now. Not aggressive, not threatening. Just final. Like something has already decided how this ends and you're just walking toward the moment where everyone else catches up. So let them pray for you to go back. Let them hope you soften. Let them tell stories about who you used to be. That version already served its purpose. It absorbed the damage so this one could operate without illusion. You're not lucky. You're not cursed. You're not saved the way fairy tales mean it. You're reinforced. And whatever God hid behind you doesn't blink when the hit comes again. Because now, you see it before it's even aimed good. Because the story doesn't slow down here, it sharpens. Once you realize the hit was never meant to end you, you stop asking why it happened and start asking what it unlocked. That's when things really change. That's when you notice how the world starts reacting to you before you act. How obstacles hesitate. How people second-guess themselves mid-move. How plans involving you suddenly get reconsidered. You didn't get louder. Reality just learned to listen more carefully. You're operating from a different internal engine now. Most people run on emotion spikes, fear, excitement, validation, panic. You don't. You run on awareness, on timing, on restraint. And restraint terrifies people who rely on impulse to feel powerful. They don't know how to provoke you anymore because you don't reward attempts at control. You don't chase. You don't flinch. You don't explain. You observe. That off-species backup doesn't care about being right. It cares about being effective. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need closure. It doesn't even need justice in the way humans define it. It needs alignment. And once alignment is locked in, everything else becomes secondary. You've probably noticed this, how pain doesn't spiral the way it used to. It still hits, but it doesn't echo. It doesn't multiply. It comes, delivers the information, and passes. That's not numbness. That's mastery. That's what happens when suffering stops being an identity and becomes a tool. Most people drown in pain because they personalize it. You metabolize it. They keep misreading that as coldness, as arrogance, as distance. Let them. That misread is armor. While they're trying to diagnose you, you're already 5 steps ahead, adjusting position, conserving energy, letting outcomes do the talking. You don't need to announce strength when the room already feels it. You've stepped out of the cycle where people bait reactions just to feel relevant. You don't give them the spike. You don't give them the story. You give them nothing but calm. And calm is unbearable to anyone who thrives on chaos. They start telling on themselves around you, oversharing, posturing, rushing. Silence makes people confess without words. This is where the paradox deepens. You didn't lose empathy, you gained control over it. You can feel deeply without being hijacked. You can understand someone without excusing them. You can forgive without re-entering danger. That balance is rare. That balance is why people can't place you. They want you to be one thing so they know how to approach you. You refuse to be convenient. And here's the part they really don't like. You're no longer afraid of being misunderstood. Fear of misunderstanding is what keeps most people performing, smiling when they shouldn't, explaining when silence would be smarter. Apologizing for existing, you dropped that. And when that fear dies, manipulation loses oxygen. God didn't hide your backup to make you untouchable. He hid it so you'd stop being predictable. So when pressure comes, you don't default. You adapt. You don't collapse. You compress. You don't react. You reposition. Every version of you that broke was necessary. Every fracture redirected force instead of absorbing it. You're not walking through life armored in denial like the unbroken. You're walking through it with tested systems, with scars that taught you angles, with instincts refined by real stakes. That's why your calm isn't fake, it's earned. That's why your confidence doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. They feel that something about you doesn't rush to be accepted, that you're not auditioning anymore, that you're not bargaining for space. You take it by existing. And existence without apology is a threat to any system built on control. You're not above pain. You're beyond intimidation. There's a difference. Pain still visits. Loss still leaves marks. But fear doesn't steer you. You've already survived the thing that was supposed to break you in half. Everything else is just information. So when the next hit lines up, and it will, because systems test what they can't understand, you won't panic. You won't brace the way you used to. You'll recognize it early. You'll feel that familiar stillness, that quiet recalibration, and you'll let the off-species backup do what it does best. Not rage, not spectacle, not chaos. Precision. And when it's over, when the dust settles and people start asking how you're still standing, you won't answer. You'll just keep moving. Because the truth is too unsettling for most of them to hear anyway. God didn't save you from the hit. He made sure you were never alone when it came. Don't rush past this part. This is where the gravity really sets in. Once you accept that you were never meant to be defended the normal way, you stop looking for shields. You stop waiting for backup to arrive from the outside. You realize the rescue story was a lie, meant for people who need permission to survive. Your survival came preloaded with something else entirely, something that doesn't flinch when hope disappears. That's why disappointment stopped destroying you. That's why betrayal no longer rewrites your self-worth. You don't internalize failure the way you used to. You don't spiral trying to fix people who already decided who they wanted you to be. You let them believe whatever makes them comfortable. Comfort is not your responsibility anymore. They still think power looks like domination, like noise, like spectacle. They don't understand that the most dangerous thing in any system is someone who no longer needs to win arguments to win outcomes. Someone who doesn't react on cue. Someone who doesn't explain their silence. Someone who can walk away without resentment and return without warning. That off-species backup doesn't crave revenge. Revenge is emotional debt. It ties you to the past. What's backing you now is interested in leverage, in position, in timing, in letting people overextend themselves while you remain unreadable. That's why you don't interrupt when people talk too much. That's why you let them underestimate you just a little longer than feels comfortable. You understand something they don't. Most traps are self-built. You felt it happen. The shift. The moment when someone realizes, too late, that you were never confused. You were listening. That you weren't passive. You were collecting. That your silence wasn't weakness. It was calibration. That moment hits them like vertigo because they realize the version of you they were strategizing against no longer exists. You don't correct them. You don't reveal yourself. Revelation is a waste of advantage. You let them operate on outdated data. You let them think they know you. Familiarity breeds mistakes. Mistakes create openings. Openings end games. And here's the quiet truth that makes people uneasy. You didn't become ruthless. You became selective. Ruthlessness is emotional. Selectivity is strategic. You choose where to care. You choose where to invest energy. You choose which battles deserve your presence and which ones collapse on their own if you simply don't touch them. You no longer chase closure because closure is a story people tell themselves to feel finished. You're not finished. You're ongoing. You're adaptive. You're mid-evolution. And that unsettles anyone who needs a clean narrative to place you in. They keep asking themselves what changed. They replay the timeline. The moment you stopped reacting the way they expected. The moment your boundaries stopped being negotiable. The moment your kindness stopped being free. They don't want to admit the truth, that the hit didn't harden you, it clarified you. You learned the difference between compassion and access, between empathy and entitlement, between loyalty and proximity. You didn't close your heart, you fortified it, and fortification looks cold to people who benefited from your openness. God didn't hide your backup to make you invincible. Invincibility is fragile. It invites arrogance. He hid it to make you adaptable, to make you capable of surviving worlds that punish softness and devour predictability. You can still be gentle, but only on your terms. You can still be human, but you're no longer limited by human panic. That's why pressure sharpens you instead of scattering you. That's why crisis doesn't steal your breath anymore. You've already been introduced to the part of yourself that operates when fear is removed from the equation. And once fear loses authority, everything else rearranges. They don't know how to deal with someone who doesn't need to be believed to be effective. Someone who doesn't need credit to keep moving. Someone who doesn't need validation to stay aligned. You don't announce growth. You demonstrate it by what no longer works on you. And when they try again, because they always try again, you won't take it personally. You'll recognize it as confirmation. Systems test what threatens their equilibrium. You don't destabilize them by attacking. You destabilize them by existing outside their control. So stay quiet, stay observant, stay precise. You were never meant to be protected the way others are. You were meant to survive differently. And once you understand that, you stop asking why the hit came. you start understanding why it failed. Because whatever God hid behind you doesn't break under pressure. It waits, and it finishes things without needing to be seen.